Jeff Delman, Senior PPP Specialist World Bank, Ms. Andita Fiercely Utami, Environmental Economist, Dedi Sharif Usman, the Secretary of DG State Assets, and all the high-level management officers at the Ministry of Finance, and ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning to all of you. Praise to the Lord the Almighty for blessing bestowed upon us so that we have the opportunity to virtually meet in this event. We gather here to explore on the issue of sustainable infrastructures and its feasibility. Before I get into my main point, I want to thank all the distinguished speakers for attending this event to share your insight on the issue. I also thank the Secretary Director, especially DJKN Muda, for organizing this exciting event. Ladies and gentlemen, with the vaccine development and distribution, the world can finally see the light at the end of the dark tunnel that is COVID-19 outbreak. Unfortunately, the staggering loss of life are irreplaceable. Many find themselves jobless and become dependent to social safety net. Others struggle to survive amidst limited physical mobility. On the macro scale, the pandemic leaves trail of devastating impacts all over the globe, including Indonesia. Just last year, we celebrated Indonesia's newly minted status as upper middle income country. Sadly, we once again back to lower middle income country as the pandemic wave took a toll on global economy. Furthermore, the year of 2020 was alarming for more than one reason. It was not only the beginning of global pandemic, it was also the year of climate extreme. While the media relentlessly report on the growing losses and cost of the viral outbreak, the looming threat of environmental disasters are often drowned out, appearing to be less urgent than it actually is. The year 2020 went down in history as one of the warmest years on the record. Wildfires in Australia, heat wave in US, savage storms in the Pacific and Atlantic regions, devastating flood and year-long drought. Environmentally wise, we are currently inching closer to the point of no return. Oftentimes, it may feel like we have to choose between the two, rapid economic growth or environmental protection. But many studies have shown how closely interrelated economic growth and environmental sustainability are. The Swiss Re Institute released a report that if no climate action taken, the world is set to lose 18% of global GDP. The Indonesian Minister of Finance herself has voiced similar concern and calls for action to mitigate the risk. Sitting atop the ring of fire zone, combined with fast coastline, means that Indonesia is at a precarious position should the extreme weather become a new normal. So the question is not whether we have to choose economy over environment or vice versa, but how to bring about prosperity and still making this world a livable place to live. Distinguished guests, it is hard to overstate the importance of infrastructure development, especially in developing countries. Infrastructures enable mobility and economic activity. It powers houses, offices, and public facilities. It connects people beyond the confine of geographical borders. It promotes inclusivity and better public service to all. With good infrastructures comes robust economic development. Reliable infrastructure is the fundamental building block of nations' wealth. It ensures better supply chain of goods and services, making way for more efficient business and lessen the price disparity of products in different parts of the country. There is also a significant multiplier effect because it provides job fields for thousands of workers and enable people to travel and look for better employment opportunity. While the benefit of aggressive infrastructure development may seem obvious, it comes with a unique challenge. Funding expansive infrastructure projects requires large investment upfront, and the payback period is often long. Moreover, the volatility of current global economy also adds another layer of complexity in the funding of infrastructure projects. A total of IDR 6,445 billion worth of infrastructure projects are planned to be built in Indonesia within the period of 2020 to 2024. However, only IDR 2,385 billion or 37 of the total required budget can be funded by state. Meanwhile, loans from multilateral institutions and government-issued bonds present a more increasing burden to state budget. As such, exploring other sources of funding is crucial in ensuring the feasibility of infrastructure projects. This is where public-private partnership becomes crucial sources of potential funding. The issue of Presidential Regulation number 32 of 2020 provides more options through which government could raise private funding to fund future investment projects. Limited concession scheme allow the government to recycle existing assets, enabling them to be monetized. The scheme also benefits the private actors because it involves existing assets, hence reducing investor exposure to construction risk. With the increasingly complex nature of sustainable infrastructure development, we need to explore more of creative funding solutions for future projects. As the state asset manager, DG SAM is gearing up to take even more active role to implement sustainable practices in infrastructure development. Along with our special mission vehicle, PT Sarana Multi Infrastructure and PT Penjamin Infrastruktur Indonesia, DG SAM aims to secure sustainable funding to build sustainable infrastructures, which in turn deliver sustainable growth for the people. Ladies and gentlemen, effort to build infrastructure and to preserve the environment have one thing in common. Both are an investment for the future. This August will mark 76 years since our nation declared its independence. Thus, it is an apt timing to start asking these questions. How do we picture our country in the future, long after we're no longer around? What kind of future do we want our children to live in? What legacy will we leave for the next generation? Lastly, I would like to thank Pak Hidayat Amir, Pak Mary Jalnur, Mr. Jeff Delman, and Ms. Andita Fiercely for willing to share their insight on the issues. I hope through today's event, we can shed more light on sustainable infrastructure development to discuss its feasibility and possible challenges and how it will eventually lead us to a prosperous future. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Pak Rio, for delivering the opening speech. As Pak Rio mentioned earlier, that today's seminar will give us useful insight to contribute more to our country. And I took a good note on the important key from Pak Rio, that we should look in for a good way to bring prosperity, at the same time still making this world a livable place to live. That's a huge task to do, but we're working on it. Honorable distinguished speaker, friends and colleagues, without further ado, let me introduce you to our moderator for today. The one will walk you through the presentation until question and answer session after that. It's such an honor for me to introduce you to our moderator. He's been working for Ministry of Finance for 21 years, earned his Master of Property Studies at the University of Queensland, and now he's a PhD candidate in Property Economics, Queensland University of Technology, Australia. Please give a warm welcome for our moderator, Bapak Darmawan Dwi Atmoko. Good morning, Bapak. Apa kabar?
Selamat pagi, Mas
Pagi.
Devi.
Semoga lancar, sehat ya, Pak, di Brisbane. Kami silakan Bapak untuk nanti memperkenalkan narasumber, kemudian memandu paparan dan diskusi panel maupun tanya jawab kemudian. Pak Darmawan, the floor is yours.
Terima kasih, Mas David. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Sejahtera buat kita semua. Selamat pagi Ibu Bapak yang kami hormati. Selamat bergabung dalam webinar DJKN Muda pagi ini tentang pembangunan infrastruktur yang berkelanjutan, Sustainable Infrastructure and its Feasibility. Izinkan kami akan memandu diskusi ini dengan dua bahasa Indonesia dan bahasa Inggris, untuk memaksimalkan diskusi antar panel maupun nanti panel dengan peserta. Talking about sustainability in infrastructure, more than decades ago, Barber has introduced a triangle of sustainable economic development. It is expected that an economic development should justify not only economic benefits, but also provide a social welfare and friendly to the environment. And infrastructure development as a backbone of a country economy should also contributing for social and conducted in environmentally friendly ways. Nowadays, Indonesian government has prioritized infrastructure investment to boost the country economic development. Therefore, it is raised a question on to what extent the infrastructure investment in Indonesia catalyzing economic growth while ensuring on providing social and environmental benefits. Atau bahasa gaulnya, sejauh mana sih ini, bro, infrastruktur yang selama ini rame ini kita diinvestasi oleh pemerintah dan rame didiskusikan di banyak media dan formal maupun media sosial, dia akan tidak hanya crude kepada ekonomi, tapi seperti yang dimention Pak Dirjen juga bermanfaat buat kita semua, masyarakat, secara sosial, dan juga dia bisa berkontribusi untuk menjaga lingkungan. In this special occasion, we have 4 speakers who will share their knowledge and expertise on responding to the issue. Now, let me introduce the speakers. The first speaker is Bapak Hidayat Amir. Assalamualaikum, Pak Hidayat Amir.
Waalaikumsalam.
Bagaimana kabarnya?
Alhamdulillah baik, sehat. Tetap bersemangat.
Terima kasih, Pak Amir. And the second speaker is Mr. Jeff Delman. Good morning, Mr. Jeff Delman.
Good morning, everyone.
How are you today?
Fantastic.
Fantastic. Amazing. And the third is Bapak May Rizal Nur. Assalamualaikum Pak May, selamat pagi.
You still mute, Pak May.
Pak
Sorry,
May.
got disrupted by the technology. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Sehat Pak May?
Ya, alhamdulillah. Lawan.
And the last is the only is very young and I think the only beautiful from the 4 speakers. And because the rest is handsome, so this is the beautiful one. Mbak Afu. Mbak Afu, selamat pagi. Selamat pagi Mbak Afu.
Mbak Afu not yet joining us, I guess, Bapak.
Okay, that's now just continue and waiting for Mbak Afu. So before we start the presentation of each presenter today, I would like to just share and explain what
mereka dengan harus belajar sesuatu yang sebetulnya itu bisa
rundown today. So this discussion will be divided into 3 sessions. The first session is presentation of each speaker. Then the second session is a panel discussion. Then the last one is question and answer session. Now we come to the first session. The first speaker is Bapak Hidayat Amir. It is well known as Kang Amir actually. Kang Amir is well known as Kang Amir. He finished a master degree in economics in the University of Indonesia, and his PhD was awarded from the University of Queensland, Australia. Ini mungkin saya boleh berbangga dikit nih karena satu alumni dan dengan Pak Amir, dan saya harus berterima kasih banyak karena dulu waktu di Brisbane itu saya banyak sekali ngerepotin beliau. Matur nuwun Pak Hidayat Amir. Pak Hidayat Amir now serves as a head of a macroeconomic policy center in the Fiscal Policy Agency in the Ministry of Finance. Pak Hidayat Amir, the next 20 minutes are yours, please.
Thank you, Pak Darwangan. Very good morning, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm happy today. Thank you very much for having me in this very interesting forum discussing one of important topics in Indonesia economic development. I will maybe just make my presentation concise, just to show that infrastructure development is very important in terms of development issues, development agendas in Indonesia, and it is also giving a big impact to the economic growth. I think this is our role today, just to make sure, just to convince you that infrastructure development is really important and critical for our economic development. Okay, next slide, please. I just take a picture from World Bank. This is Logistic Performance Index. Unfortunately, the latest data is 2018. I try to put several countries, Indonesia and Japan, comparing Indonesia and the advanced countries, and also the group of countries with for high income OECDs and also lower middle income countries. You can see here, basically infrastructure is in the right part of the graph of the web. You can see here Indonesia in the middle, just after the lower middle income countries, but still below the Japan and also high income countries, OECDs. So infrastructure is part of, this is not only single standalone what we call it factor that important, but this is also combining with several other factors that composing the logistic performance index. Logistic performance index basically the efficiency on transporting goods and services in the economy. So this is give the sense that advanced countries need advanced infrastructure. Pak Rio already mentioned that infrastructure development need huge financing support, and this is the development takes a long period. So basically, this is long-term issues, not the short-term issues. So we have to consider the trajectory of the economy, the trajectory of the society, the trajectory to develop the prosperity of the country. So then the infrastructure development to conform with this kind of objective. So the right hand picture just give you just remind you this is the difference, the infrastructure in the developed countries and in the developing countries. So basically, with the proper advanced infrastructure, the livelihood of human being become more advanced. Advanced here meaning with all the meaning of advanced term, basically advanced word. So not only the high income, but also the way, the prosperity, the livelihood, the well-being of the people in the country. So this is the objective. I point out here the infrastructure role, the importance of infrastructure on transforming our country become advanced country in the future. Next slide. I quoted from task advisory analysis. I think this is very, very popular several years ago. when Indonesia still struggling on or trying to put a priority on the infrastructure development. This is the highlight the benefit of infrastructure development. Basically, here the infrastructure development or infrastructure investment give the economic impact not only during the construction period, but also the impact when the infrastructure is placed. Whatever the kind of infrastructure, the type of infrastructure, because the type and the kind of infrastructure itself, as I mentioned earlier, has to be designed in purpose with the design of our future, the country's future. So this is basically the impact to the economy during the construction and after the construction, and trying to give a multiplier in the economy, not only during the construction, but also grounding after the construction, or basically when the infrastructure already being operated. Next slide, please. This is just give you the theoretical. When we trying to connect the infrastructure development or the infrastructure investment with economic growth. I put here the formula of economic growth. Basically, the economic growth or the GDP, the growth of economy consisting three variables. What we call it A represent the total factor productivity or productivity. Basically, the way we work, the way we live. This is describe or define the productivity of the society of the country. And then the second part, if K, represent the physical capital, including infrastructure, and also L represent labor. Mind you that Indonesia today, we are still experiencing the demographic dividend. We have a huge population, young and educated. So basically we have source of labor. Not only we have, but we have a huge source of labor. But the labor itself need to conform with the job. The economists need to provide the job that in line, that can absorb the labor force at this time. So we need to have a supply side development. So infrastructure giving the stimulus to the economy in the supply side of the economy, and labor together bringing up the economic activity higher. With the advanced infrastructure, with more educated, skilled labor, the combination will bring higher productivity to the economy, and put some innovation, technology adoption. Also need the very well educated person to do the innovation and also adopting the technology. So the availability, proper and adequate infrastructure combining with labor will give us a higher productivity to the economy. This is the basic concept of the economic growth. So we intend to have high value added economic activities. This is the objective when we develop in terms of human capital development and also physical capital development. We will have the increase in the productivity and then the high value added economic activity. So combining this one, as I mentioned earlier, by creating decent work for large, young, and educated workforce, we will basically, this is the way to improve, to increase the economic growth potential for Indonesia. Next slide. And this slide highlighted the importance of developing infrastructure in Indonesia. boosting productivity and competitiveness, I already discussed previously in the previous slide. And also, we facing the fact in Indonesia today. The infrastructure development varies among region in Indonesia. We usually consider the difference between Java, non-Java. If we talk about Jabodetabek, kalau kita melihat Jabodetabek, infrastrukturnya ya kualitas negara maju. But if we talk about Purworejo, our hometown, maybe kelas menengah lah, kira-kira seperti itu. But if you talk another areas outside Java, maybe we have a different perspective. So inequity of infrastructure among region in Indonesia is a huge challenge. Okay, there is a inequality among region, but in Indonesia, if we see in aggregate, we have high infrastructure gap comparing the objective as advanced countries, comparing the advanced countries. And now we also facing the changing in our hemisphere, in our economic landscape. We are now entering what we call it revolution industry 4.0 or knowledge economy. Different type of infrastructure needed with the different type of living. So basically, previously we say that, okay, we have to focus on basic infrastructure like road, railway, school, health facilities, and so on. Energy, basically the connectivity. But now we are facing very quick, very fast changing in the needed of technology or digital infrastructure. This is our challenge. Not only comparing with advanced countries, but if we intend to see Indonesia in the future and the changing in the landscape of our living. So this is high infrastructure gap. And then, of course, infrastructure. Better infrastructure will improve public service delivery and social welfare. Pak Rio already highlighted previously. Next slide. Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, the issues, the development, the infrastructure development is about long-term issues. Need a huge financing and long-term commitment. And Pak Rio already highlighted state budget itself not sufficient to finance or funding the infrastructure development. We need support from private sector, SOEs, local government, and so on. So basically, this is this big task, very complicated issues. So there is a need for coordination, solid, better coordination. Because this is our experience when I work at Center for Fiscal Risk Management. The issues of infrastructure is always linking with this kind of challenge. Financing gap and long-term commitment, coordination. I have an experience, for example, I just give you the example. The central government through the line minister developed the seaport, but the road to to connect to the seaport, the responsibility in the local government. But when the power in the local government changing, so the priority changing, so the seaport already there, but the development of the road still missing. So basically, this is the impact of infrastructure development become, I don't know, if the operational not happening in the development process. And then we talk about the sustainability. I think this is the challenge for the future. We need the infrastructure, not only the development, but also in the operational and maintaining the post-development phase. Project priority, what kind of prioritization that should we have, because we have to develop very financing support, but the financing itself is limited. And then we also facing the rigidity of procedure and regulation. Land issues become land procurement become top issues in Indonesia. Infrastructure development. Next slide. Yeah. Usually, if we talk about infrastructure development, the proposal to develop the infrastructure project usually only consider financial feasibility of the need of financial support. How many financial resources need to be allocated to support this kind of infrastructure project, and who will finance this project? Usually end up with just financial security. So with this kind of motive background, at 2013, 2014, we are in the Fiscal Policy Agency. We develop and maintain a macro model. We also maintain a computable general equilibrium model at that time, but CG is real sector model. We're trying to incorporate financial social accounting metric in the model as a baseline at the base main database, and combining with transport network in Indonesia. So by developing this new model, we can assess the impact, the economic impact of infrastructure development. In this case, for the transportation project, for example, Tol Sumatera, Tol Java, and so on. This work already published in the Research in Transportation Economy, and we still maintaining this model. To basically, this is dedicated to assess the economic impact of connectivity infrastructure. Next slide. Yeah, thanks God, we already doing a good reform on the fossil fuel subsidy reform. This is I usually call it as an important milestone for infrastructure development in Indonesia, because by doing the reform, we have additional fiscal space to support the development, the spending on the education and health. This is basically human capital development, and also in the infrastructure. This is part of our reform. I will remind you that we already have that one, and we have to continue our commitment because, as I mentioned earlier, education, health development, and also infrastructure development. This is not only short-term issues, this is also long-term issues. Next slide. Next, please. By doing the reform, the government already started to changing the mindset of development from the short-term perspective to the long-term perspective. So this is the milestone that give us a lot of opportunity to bring better infrastructure in the future. So even though, as I mentioned earlier, local or state financing is not enough, but the critical to start the commitment on development in the infrastructure already started and already in place. You can see the impact to this with so many infrastructure projects in Indonesia, mainly in the energy and connectivity. Again, I'm not not neglected with the financing issues, because economic impact will in place when the construction and after the construction, but the financing need to be sustainable also to have the sustainable development in the infrastructure. We need also to fine tune to manage the financing issues, so then the infrastructure development can continue smoothly. Next slide. This is the commitment that documented in our official document RPJMN. Dalam RPJMN kita berharap ada structural transformation, terjadi akselerasi pertumbuhan ekonomi. This is the several key in the structural transformation. Kita perlu manufaktur yang lebih kuat, apalagi memasuki industri 4.0. Kita juga karena background kita agriculture-nya kuat, jadi dia juga potensi, tetapi produktivitasnya masih lemah. Kita melihat the way we work, the way we produce, the way the economic activities in the agriculture sector, I think need to be improved with the good agriculture practices to increase the productivity in the agriculture sector. Modernization in the agriculture sector is important. The transformation on service sector. Usually when we talk about service sector, we directly connect it with informal sector. No, there are so many service sector that were giving the high value added to the economy, mainly based on innovation and technology, digital, and so on. We also have natural resources, how to streaming the natural resources become giving more high value. And the sustainable infrastructure development will facilitate all those things for electricity and construction, as I mentioned earlier. Next slide. This is some alternative infrastructure financing scheme. We're finding a better financing scheme due to the constraint of the state budget, SOEs, and trying to giving the PPP scheme. I think Merizal will talk, will explore more detail on these issues. And we're also giving the incentive for new investment, for incentive for research and development, deregulation of investment. Basically, we bring necessary measure to support the infrastructure development, to invite more investment, to give infrastructure financing scheme better in the process, in the progress. Next slide. I just remind you that we now facing difficult time due to the pandemic COVID-19. But difficult times already we have several years ago with so many aspects, global financial crisis, and then we have European debt crisis, trade war, and so on. We will pass with these issues. I convince you. So, well, sometimes we have to break. COVID pandemic as a break time for long-term journey on Indonesia economic development. But please still be aware, still in mind that we have a long-term development agendas. So, okay, we're postponing some infrastructure project this year and last year and this year or maybe next year, but we have to continue our agenda because we have a huge objective as the Indonesia Maju in the future. Next slide. Yeah, this is just give you the summary that we are willing to have better productivity and competitiveness in Indonesia. And as I mentioned earlier, we have enough labor. We still have a window of demographic dividend up to 2030s. So we have to exploit this potential. So basically, for the component labor, we still have resources here, and for the investment, for the capital, we conducting the structural reform. We already started with job creation law, basically to give a better foundation for attracting the investment coming to Indonesia and building the infrastructure, not only infrastructure but the economic activities in Indonesia. So with those kind of support and combining with the institutional development, bureaucratic reform, regulation to encourage ease of doing business, so we expect to have better productivity comparing to business as usual scenario. This is our objective. So the average 6% growth, hopefully this is become a reality if we conducting our homework to do the reform. This is just showing you the comparing that if we do the reform and if we only working with the business as usual agendas. Next slide. This is only for the summary. This is, I think, the last part. Okay, COVID-19 is part of disruption. This is a big disruption that may be changing our economic landscape, the way of living, and then as a consequence, we have to reprioritize our development, here and there adjustment, and then also we have to giving the policy support, as I mentioned earlier. Infrastructure development still in our agenda. Okay, we have to postpone a little bit, but we have to gaining our momentum again to accelerating the infrastructure development, to accelerate the economic growth in the future. We also need the synergy. Usually during the bad time, we much easier to talk to each other to see what need to be revised, need to be reprioritized, need to be become the commitment together in the economic development. I will stop here, Pak Darmawan. Back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Hidayat Amir, for it was very straightforward and very clear presentation on how infrastructure is play a critical role in Indonesian economic development. And we move to the second speaker, Pak Jeff Delmon. Pak Jeff, yes, Pak Jeff Delmon. I call you Pak. It's fine, yeah?
Perfect.
Jeff.
I accept.
Jeff will give an overview of Indonesian infrastructure development from a global perspective. And Mr. Jeff is a senior PPP specialist in the World Bank. He's a global infrastructure finance and PPP advisor. He spent more than 10 years in Paris and London, who globally advising infrastructure and PPP projects. Mr. Jeff, please, it is your turn for the next 20 minutes. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Bob Darmawan. Can you hear me okay? Let me share my screen.
Clear, yeah.
Perfect. And I just wanted to thank Pod David, who introduced us all as this event, which is incredibly timely, but has been organized by the youth and innovative staff of the DG, right? And so, of course, the speakers are the most youthful and the most innovative. So I accept that label. Thank you very much. So I'm a senior infrastructure finance specialist at the World Bank. I get to work on this fantastic topic all over the world. And of course, Indonesia is by far my favorite place. I'm based in Singapore, so I get to come to Indonesia often, or at least in normal times. So I want to share a little bit the global perspective and how other countries are looking at these issues, but very much applicable to Indonesia. So try to apply those those concepts and those ideas and the latest thinking around infrastructure development to Indonesia. But I guess the first question we've got to ask is, why infrastructure? Do we really need it now? The world is in a mess. Indonesia is having massive challenges. Shouldn't we instead be helping people pick up their lives? Shouldn't we be rescuing businesses that are in trouble? You know, aren't there other things that we need to invest in? And as Rio and Pak Amir had described much more eloquently than I could, all of those things are really, really important. And at the same time, we need to build up this infrastructure. Infrastructure is the backbone of the economy. It's the foundation on which the economy is built. And so you've got this fantastic, young, educated population ready to burst forward on the global scene. But in order to, and Pak Amir discussed the multiplier effect of infrastructure. You know, the advantage, the benefit of building that foundation of infrastructure well, and then what you build on top of it will be much more successful, much more effective, and the economic impact, the potential economic impact, is huge. As you know, Indonesia is a bit behind its equivalent middle income, upper middle income country investment levels for infrastructure. We've got a bit of a gap to make up, and that was before COVID. Right, all these figures around the RPJMN and how public money is going to reduce, private money needs to increase under the RPJMN. All of that was back in the good old days of 2019 and 2020, back when the world was normal. And now we've got this craziness, and we need to adjust our investment and be even more aggressive in our investment in infrastructure in order to help overcome the huge cliff that has been created by the COVID crisis. There's also an opportunity. And as they say, never fail to take advantage of a good crisis. There's an opportunity here to revamp the way to not just build back, but build back better, build back greener. Rio mentioned the critical point we're at historically in our management of climate change and our effect on the environment. This is a time to take Indonesia's infrastructure program and make it green and push it even harder. And I know that's been a real push by Indonesia on this topic, but now there's an opportunity here to take that next step. However, we're doing all of this in the face of declining, more and more scarce public resources. How do we do this? How do we build back better? How do we build back greener in the face of less and less money from the public? So let me run through a couple different things. One, obviously, is state borrowing and the government being able to borrow, and the World Bank and the ADB and others. We're all coming forward doing our best to bring as much resources as possible. But the reality is that government borrowing, IFI resources, they won't be enough. What we need to do is leverage those resources. So for every rupiah of public money, every rupiah of public debt that we leverage into the economy, we need to use that to leverage in more private investment. And part of that will be through corporate investment. So taking, for instance, the SOEs and doing better at bringing in more equity investment, helping the SOEs leverage more debt. But again, the SOEs are a really important part of the economy, really important part of the infrastructure story, but they can only be a small part. The SOEs don't have sufficient balance sheets to deliver the level of investment that Indonesia needs. And so there are also existing assets that Indonesia has that can be used to leverage in more private capital. Rio mentioned the limited concession scheme, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Future revenue streams and future investment opportunities. And Pak Amir started to dig into a little bit on the PPP front, but also on B2B. So whether it's defined as PPP under Perpres 38, 2015, or is this part of the broader spectrum of central and local governments bringing in private investment? All of that spectrum of looking forward in those future revenue stream opportunities, now is the time to make that even more effective and even more impactful. So let's go through each of these one at a time. We'll talk first about restructuring the SOEs, then look at that broader picture of asset recycling. How do we use existing assets? And then what about new investment opportunities and new revenue streams? Starting with our SOEs, and the really interesting thing is a lot of the opportunity, the possibility of leveraging up Indonesia's infrastructure sector, the basis of that was already set in the president's current platform, in the RPJMN. There was a real focus on bringing in more private capital, getting more green investment. All of this stuff was foreshadowed in the RPJMN. Now, in the face of COVID, there's an opportunity to really leverage this up and to do this faster and better than even we hoped under the RPJMN. So when we're looking at restructuring these SOEs, and you will have seen in the press all the different discussions about taking the Polindos and restructuring them, bringing them together, and then recarving them, looking at container bulk, logistics, hinterland services for ports, restructuring those Polindos to focus better on services. Taking in the air sector, very tricky questions. The Angkasa Puras, who have been huge victims in this time of COVID, massive drop in traffic, huge challenges that they have. And then Garuda, which is, he has had even more of an impact. And what do we do with Garuda's current financial situation? Looking at the road sector and the impact that we've had on the road sector, but also the debt levels of the SOEs who have been pushing over the last 5 years, in particular, to push out more and more infrastructure investment. And so those SOEs are heavily indebted. So the number one question is, how do we help the SOEs manage that debt better? And definitely over the last 4 or 5 years, there's been an increasing level of lending by SOE banks to the SOEs. Now, this is very convenient, right? It's very easy to do because it's all in the family. It's the SOE banks, it's the SOEs. We need a relationship. We need to release the SOE banks to allow them to take some of their capital back so they can be more dynamic and aggressive in investing in this new economic burst that we're heading into. We need to release the SOEs to go out and get commercial debt and do better at leveraging in private sector debt, both domestic and foreign. There's a temptation to just take SOEs that are very weak financially and shove them together with SOEs that are strong financially. And this seems on paper to be a nice, convenient way to solve problems, but it's a very tricky issue and not necessarily the most effective. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in analyzing the SOEs, the individual SOEs, how they will work together, how management will work together, whether the financial flows will be a multiplier or will they be a drain? So are we just draining the strong SOEs, or the advantages and the strengths of all of these SOEs? While we're looking at that better management of debt and better management of finances, there's a huge opportunity for improved efficiency. And so I'll take the airports for an example. You've got the Angkasa Puras that are looking at bringing in more private capital and better partners into the airport space. Not that the Angkasa Puras are doing a bad job at managing the airports, but we all know that experience on airports around the world varies dramatically. There are a lot of really good airport operators around the world doing really interesting work and who could bring in new ideas, new technologies, new relationships, linking up with different airlines. A lot of opportunities in cargo. The logistics space is going to be super interesting in both ports and airports. So how do we improve the efficiency as we also attract in new capital? And as we're improving the efficiency and managing debt better, as we get better and better at efficiency, we're going to actually attract more debt. So we're going to allow those SOEs, because they're more robust companies, to attract more and new capital from the outside. But all of this is only if we can let go of our, I guess it's our caution about bringing in partners. It's important to be cautious. It's important, but you've got to be really careful about pushing people away just because they're new or different or from the outside, and bringing in more of this foreign investment. And it's tricky, right? Thinking about the Indonesia Health Corporation, where a bunch of SOE health asset company, or the plans for bringing in geothermal assets from across the economy under one holding company. Really great opportunity to bring in private partners, not just for the money. And it can't just be about money. It has to be about improving the system, improving the services, improving the SOEs, giving the SOEs even more strength, mapping of the global capacity that's going to improve those SOEs and allow us to take the next step forward, where those SOEs are not just drivers of the economy, but they're a leverage point, they're a flexion point. Private capacity, more foreign capacity, and more foreign capital. So that's our SOEs. Underneath the SOEs, you've got all these really interesting assets. So you've got assets that potentially on their own or separated out from the government, the line ministries, the local governments that own them, or the SOEs that own them. Those assets might on their own be even more valuable than they are underneath or within that government entity. And so maybe we take those assets and bring them out to market. And this is how Rio mentioned the limited, one of the mechanisms available to help line ministries, local governments, and SOEs recycle those assets. And there are a lot of other ways to do it as well, but the fundamental idea is, let's take this asset, let's move it out and bring it out to the market. So obviously we need to ask the market, what do you think? Do you want this asset? Is this a valuable asset? Are we going to get the leverage effect? Are we going to get the capital that we need from this asset? But it's important to ask, and probably the more important question, what does that do to the asset owner? So the local government or the SOE or the line ministry that currently owns that asset, when I take it out of that asset owner, what does that do to that asset owner? What do I need to do to the asset to ring fence and to restructure it, to enable it to attract that capital, but without causing a negative impact on the asset owner? And then how do I incentivize the asset owner? And this is a tricky bit. There's a temptation to see those state assets as all just being state assets. Let's grab them, monetize them. We'll take the money, we'll put it into new assets. But those assets are currently feeding an existing state actor. So a local government is relying on the revenues from this local port in order to fund other activities. If we take the asset out of the local government, that takes that revenue stream away from that local government. So what do we do to protect the local government and help the local government benefit from the asset recycling? If the asset owner doesn't benefit, then there's not going to be the relationship, there's not going to be the partnership. That project is more likely to at least have problems, if not fail. So let's be very careful to incentivize those asset owners and take care of those asset owners. And other countries have done this in various ways. In Australia, they actually provided a bumper of investment. They added on top of the capital that was mobilized from the asset recycling, they provided a 15% bonus from the central budget because they wanted to, the energy, innovation, the financial flows, the new investment that was coming out of asset recycling. So the central government provided that support to incentivize asset owners. How are we incentivizing our asset owners? This is also a potential opportunity for the Sovereign Wealth Fund, for INA. INA could be a huge player in this space and could really do a lot to help those asset owners find investors and find partners. The difficulty is that INA is in a tricky space because they've all come and brought money to INA, and those investors are expecting investments. Does INA represent the asset owner, or does it invest? And it needs to play a very careful balancing role between these two. It needs to keep the investors happy, but it's out leveraging capital for those asset owners for Indonesia. And so INA can't just take projects. It needs to be the best deal available to those asset owners. And the asset owners need to feel that INA is coming in with the best deal and the best support possible. So they see it as all positive influence of INA as it comes in. And I know that's the intention. It's just we're at a very tricky space with INA. And it's this early days that are very difficult for any of these kind of sovereign wealth funds. And then the final challenge is that on asset recycling, we talk about this again in a second. Over the last 5-10 years, when we've looked for foreign investment or we look for private investment, there's been a tendency to rely on the SOEs to push the majority of those new investments. And because the SOEs are all in the family, the SOEs don't necessarily look for a risk allocation that's consistent with foreign investment. And that's made us quite comfortable with a very simple risk allocation framework that doesn't require government to step up to SOEs have taken those risks. Going forward, foreign investors and pure private sector investors are unlikely to bear those risks. And we really need to reconsider our risk allocation to fit with the expectations and the needs of private and foreign investors. And so that same comment sort of flows through on what do we do about new investments. And even in these difficult times, new investments can still move. New investments are still really important. This is the time where all of that work that Indonesia's done on the PPP framework, creating the joint office, the MOF PPP unit, which has expanded massively, the relationship with the Bapenas PPP team, all of those things are really important. And that progress that's been made is going to bear fruit now, because now is the time to really push into this and use those experiences to benefit the other private investments, this B2B, this huge amorphous group of activities, which are both SOEs, local governments, even line ministries, going out for private investment, but not necessarily under Preface 38, 2015. So huge opportunities to push into that. Again, our difficulty is that the PPP framework, the experience, for instance, in toll roads, the toll road tended to focus on a risk allocation that the SOEs would accept. We need to move past that and move on to the level of risk allocation that private sector, and in particular foreign private sector, will accept, that we can attract more and better investment. Huge opportunities here. The green financing, and I think this cuts across all of the above, one of the things that foreign investors will love is green investment. There are huge pockets of money available at the moment to invest in green infrastructure. If we can move the agenda even further down this green path, not just for new assets, but also for asset recycling and existing assets, show the foreigners how you're going to use this money to invest in green infrastructure, how these new investments are going to be latest technology, green, environmentally friendly. All of that's hugely influential and will allow you to tap into new pools of funding and will make these projects even more competitive. And I guess one last point, don't forget that the rest of the world is going through a very similar experience. And so your competitor countries, especially in the region, are asking these exact same questions, and they're asking me to come talk to them about the exact same issues. These are all tricky questions for all of us, but there's a lot of competition. The more we can invest in making Indonesia the best of the best when it comes to putting these structures application, greening your investments, you will be able to attract much more interesting, more volumes, more interesting investors, and the best investors. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pak Jeff. Terima kasih banyak, Pak Jeff. So the clue is an opportunity, ya, Pak, untuk green. Dan Pak Jeff underline the green investor is huge there outside and is ready to bring the money to Indonesia to build the green infrastructure in Indonesia. That's a nice and very good point from Pak Jeff. Sebelum saya melanjutkan ke speaker ketiga, ke Pak Merijal Nur, saya mau menyambut atau menyampaikan welcoming dulu ke Mbak Afu. Selamat bergabung, Mbak Afu.
Terima kasih banyak, Mas Darmawan. Apa kabar?
Bagaimana kabar? Baik, saya baik. Ya, Nanti Mbak Afu akan presentasi setelah Pak Merizal. Dan buat teman-teman yang Ibu Bapak, mohon silakan untuk kasih note atau pertanyaan di link yang sudah tersedia yang disampaikan panitia. Silakan untuk menyampaikan pertanyaannya. Now we move to the third speaker, Bapak Merizal Nur. Yeah, Pak Merizal. Pak Me is one of a key person who ensure the SOE can be frontliner in accelerating Indonesian economic growth. Pak Me graduated from Nanyang University in Japan in Master of Business Administration. Pak Me has abundance of knowledge and investment and financial sector, including infrastructure investment. Saya harus juga banyak berterima kasih kepada Pak Me ini karena banyak sekali kesempatan belajar saya dengan beliau dan ini momentum juga buat saya untuk mengucapkan terima kasih kepada beliau. Pak Me, please, it is your turn now. Unmute Pak Me, mohon maaf. Yes.
I got a little bit nervous. Thank you, Mas Wawan, for the time. The Honorable Pak Rio, the Director General of DGSAM, my fellow speaker, Pak Jeff Delmon, Pak Amir Hidayat Amir, Bu Anindya F. Utami, Pak Wawan call you up ya. Pak Dedi, the Secretary of DGSAM, the high level of management, and the all seminar participants. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning to all of us. Hope we all in healthy condition in the middle of the COVID outbreak. It is an honor to me to be with you in this seminar, to be together with the great people, the great presenter, and allow me to deliver my presentations by using mixing language. Hope you understand that my English is not as good as the presenters before. Now I'm preparing the presentations related to how the SMV's role. SMV, Special Mission Vehicles, is the state-owned enterprises under coordination of the Ministry of Finance that having a role as the to enhance the role of Ministry of Finance on fiscal role. At the time, this time I'm going to present some points. Please next. For the beginning, I'll try to see what the problems, and to see to the next to tell a little bit about SMV, Special Mission Vehicle of Ministry of Finance, and the next I'm going to discuss about the infrastructure development scheme through PPP, and the last I'm going to discuss the current issues in pandemic impact on the economy and especially on infrastructure. Next. Next, please. If you see this file, there is a gap between the need and the capacity of the government to develop the infrastructure, to finance infrastructure, and development of infrastructure in Indonesia need big amount of money. By the time of 2020 and 2024, it is estimated that the budget of needed is around 6,445 trillion rupiahs. Is such a big amount of money. Yeah? Basically, to provide the infrastructure is the as a public good is a government's responsibility. But considering the budget constraint, some of the infrastructure can be offered to the private sector through a grid scheme, PPP, public-private partnership schemes, for example. We can see on the data how the government budget having role on the development of the infrastructure. Only 1/3 of the budget needed can provided by the government. So we have no choice if we want to accelerate the development of infrastructure. We have to asking for and invite the other parties other than governments parties such as SOEs and private sector. Next. As we see on these presentations in this file, that governments has already allocated during 2005 and 2020 some amount of budget, whether for the capital injection to SOE or for the public service agencies, worth about 479 trillion rupiahs. And we can see that the infrastructure has been the main focus on the government investment on this budget allocation. 203 billion rupiahs, maybe a half of the budget allocated 2005 and 2023 is allocated for infrastructure. We can see that how the government took into account the development of infrastructure as the important aspect of development. Next, we move to the role of SMV. Next slide, please. Next. Indonesia have a dream to be world's first largest economy by 2045. This is what we are going to aim in 2045. And one of the way to get and to achieve that target is to accelerate by accelerating the development of the infrastructure, because the development of infrastructure is the most important things in the economy. Because there are many advantages of the country that is have developed infrastructure. Because the infrastructure is the foundation of the economy, the backbone of the economy, as Pak Jeff mentioned before. The infrastructure is having a big impact to the economy. The infrastructure can reduce the logistic costs, make the more efficiency in many aspects, time efficiency and other efficiency, and infrastructure also make the regional growth more spreading out. And because of the high impact to the economy, development of infrastructure is the very important thing in order to get the target of Indonesians to be the world's fourth largest economy in 2045. The answer whether we can reach the target or not is very dependent on us. How enthusiasm, how focused we are on the on development, any aspect that having a big impact to the economy. One of them is infrastructure. And talking about the SMV, role of the special mission vehicles in under coordinating of Ministry of Finance. As we know, there are 5 SOEs under the Ministry of Finance coordination. There are in PTSMI, which is on infrastructure financing, and PTPII, Indonesian Guarantee Corporation, which having core business on credit guarantee, and PTSMF in housing finance, and Indonesian Exim Bank on export financing. And the last one is the PT Geodipa Energy, as Pak Jeff mentioned before, that we are now about moving toward the environmental friendly development, and PT Geodipa Energy having its role on building the infrastructure, building infrastructure related to the environmental friendly energy, geothermal. And this, if we see the value and the role of the SMV, we can see that PTSMI, the total commitment value until now, PTSMI already reached 117,000 trillion rupiahs, and total value that is financed by the PTSMI, 399 trillion rupiahs, spread out over the 292 projects. Yeah, I think it's such a big amount of project that is already financed by the PTSMI, and PII is having important role on the guaranteed some projects, PPP project schemes, and until now already guaranteed 66.4 trillion rupiahs, and the total value project guaranteed by the PTPPI is 315 trillion rupiahs. And on the housing field, the PTSMF already financed the amount of 69 trillion rupiahs, and for the numbers of debtors, more than 1 billion debtors. And export financing, Indonesian Exim Bank already having outstanding loan 90.4 trillion rupiahs, and by total export value 319 trillions. And PT Geodipa now, beside producing the energy by using the geothermal, has amount of 60 megawatt on the Dieng field and 60 megawatt on Patuha field. And Geodipa Energy also having role on as the government ruling on implementing agencies. The role of SMVs under Ministry of Finance coordination. Next slide, please. And the role of SMV and governments on PPP schemes on development the infrastructure. Start from whether from A to Z the infrastructure scheme. Start from project development. As the government decide to ask other parties to involve SOEs or private entities on development the infrastructure, the most popular scheme is PPP, public-private partnership, and as the government involving other parties, there are some effort to be have to be done in order to make more parties understand the scheme, and by that the more party can involve on the developing the infrastructure. As we know that in order to make the government that is involved on PPP scheme to make and to prepare the good proposal of the one infrastructure, the capability of preparing the project development facility proposal, project proposal. One of the activity that is done by SMVs is by providing the facility of project development to the government contracting agencies to prepare the project proposal, and to make the project proposal ready to be offered to the investors. And SMV's role in this stage, PTSMI, PII, Ministry of Finance, and also KPPIP having important role on this project development stage. And then when the government, when the not all the infrastructure projects is financially attracted by the investor. Sometimes the infrastructure projects need to be given some additional budget allocation to make the project ready to be offered to investor, and investor interested in on financing the infrastructure. Government can also provide such as viability gap fund, then availability payments, and if needed, government also can provide the government guarantee through the PTPEI, and also government having a role on land acquisition as the government portion of the infrastructure development proposal. And the last stage on financing the infrastructure projects, the PTSMI, PTIIF is also having important role on the development of the infrastructure. Next slide, please. this slide is explaining more detail how the government support on infrastructure scheme, PPP scheme for offer to the infrastructure projects. Next. Talking about the land acquisition as a main part or portion of main portion of the government, government already allocate from the years of 2016 and 2020 or more than 96 trillion rupiahs for the land acquisitions, yeah, which is allocated for toll road developments, dams, railways, port, irrigations, tourism strategic area, and water provided. These are the budget allocation for the land acquisitions to support the development of the infrastructure on these several areas. And next slide, please. Talking about the issues that is related to the current condition, the pandemic COVID. I think right now there are many infrastructure development a little bit slowing down, and some of the company that is involved on development the infrastructure having a problems impact by the COVID, and we can see how the pandemic impact on the infrastructure process, infrastructure development process. We can see in supply side, demand side, operational side, and financial side. From supply side, the pandemic COVID impact on disruption of raw material supply because of the limitation of the moving from one place to another place. So the supply of material when or needed to develop the infrastructures is disrupted. So the supply having a problem on the delivering when the pandemic COVID exists. And on demand side, there are reducing of the purchasing power of the customer, and sales also decrease. And from the operational side, there are restriction and termination of company operations, and that is having influence on the finishing the development of infrastructure. From the financial side, because of the reducing the usage of the product, revenues of the projects is going down, decreasing, and it has impact on the capability of the company to having revenue and to pay the liability, to pay the credit that is get to finance the infrastructure. And the payment scheme of the credit and having get influenced by the COVID-19. This pandemic impact on the SOEs and other parties that is involved on development of the infrastructure accumulate the problem to the company, and it is impact on delays on the finishing the development of some infrastructure development. Next slide, please. This slide is such kinds of the conclusion impact of the some of the impact of the pandemic on infrastructure sectors. And because of the great impact of the pandemic on the infrastructure and other activities, governments propose and doing some support during the pandemic. We can see on the next slide. This slide shows the sums of the government support that is related to the role of the SMVs on supporting the government during the pandemic impact. SMV supporting the government by having a role as the, how do you call, the pelaksana investasi government by using the SMVs, through the SMVs allocate some budget to help the financial problem that is faced by the some SOEs, Garuda, PT Kereta Api Indonesia, Krakatau Steel, Perumnas, and PT Perkebunan. And the SMVs that is having role on the as the pelaksana investasi itu adalah PT SMI, PT SMF, dan Indonesian Exim Bank to help those SOEs company to surpass the problem, the financial problem, their financial problems. And to regional governments, PT SME also having important role to help some regional governments to allocate some budget by the scheme of how do you call it, meminjamkan, ya, meminjamkan through the scheme of government, central government's debt to the regional governments, and it is conducted by PTSMI as the channeling agencies to the regional governments. So this how the to show how the role of SMVs of Ministry of Finance on helping governments to support during the pandemic. And next slide, we can see the more detail of the PT SMI role on supporting development of sustainable development, starting from financing and investment, giving the consultation services and project development services, and PTSMI is also having role on establishment the SDGs Indonesian One platform that is using the SDGs 16th platform as the basic standard on financing the infrastructure. We can see we can move to the next slide to see the how the development of the infrastructure toll road in Trans Sumatra, which is we government asking the PT Hutama Karya as the leader, as a leading SOEs on developing the Tol Sumatra road. The total length of the Trans Sumatra toll from the one end to the from one end in the Lampung and to the other end in Aceh is about 2,112 kilometers. That's a very long toll road, yeah, and need investment costs as much as 538 trillion rupiahs, and the segments is 24 segments built along the Tol Sumatra road, and until now that have already operated. There are 6 segments toll road that have already built and operated in Tol Sumatra, and still under constructions 8 segments. Hopefully, until 2023, the phase 1 of Tol Sumatra finish developed and can be used as the to develop a regional economy because of the budget constraints. Government do not intend to finish to the phase 3, but 2023 the government commit to finish phase 1 first, and the next 2 and 3 phase will be continued on the next term of governancy. And we can see on the next slide the value capture of the Tol Sumatra, the additional regional PDB and job creations, and also fiscal contributions. We can imagine if Tol Sumatra can fully develop from end to end, how the value capture can be gained by through Tol Sumatra, and the development of the regional development can can also accelerate it by the Tol Sumatra. And the next slide. Next slide is I think Pak Amir and Pak Jeff already also explained how the COVID impact to the infrastructure development here. Because as we know that there are some big impacts on the outbreak of COVID on our lives. Yeah, whether it is social behavior, how we work, how the government interact, how the technology and innovation, how we using the energy, almost all aspects change by the COVID. Work habits, such what we are doing right now. Usually we are doing seminar on the one place, we gather together, but right now we cannot do that because we are not allowed to interact because to prevent from COVID this spreading. So we choose our habit, that is by using this technology on doing this seminar. It is one of the example how COVID impact on the way we behave, the way we work, the way we interact, and COVID already changed the also the business behavior. Yeah. For example, the IT demand during the COVID is increasing a lot, and the transportation having negative impact during the COVID. As we can see how Garuda impacted by the COVID, how the PT Kereta Api, how the other public transportations decreasing their revenue, and even they are having the financial problem, and even worse, facing the liquidity problems. And on the other side, the IT corporate having increasing and having good opportunity during the COVID era. This habit changed a lot, and also having a challenge to development of infrastructure. As you know that the, how do you call it, lalu lintas harian, yeah, the amount of the public who the people who using the way, the road, the transportations reducing a lot, and it impact to the revenue stream of the company that is operating the toll road, for example. And as you know that the toll road company that is not only financed by the it's also financed by the credit from the bank that is must be paid, and the revenue reducing, that is going to be a mismatch the financing. And there are many companies that have problems on the financial problem. I think that is the end of my presentations, and I hope we can see how the infrastructure's role on development the Indonesia, and how the SMP's role on helping government to develop infrastructure, and how the COVID impact to infrastructure, that we have to think what we have to do to solve the problem that is caused by COVID. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak May. It was a comprehensive presentation from Pak May about the role of SOE in how infrastructure development and investment in Indonesia. Now we move to the fourth speaker, is young, smart, creative, and an environmentalist, Mbak Afu. She calls Afu. She is better known as Afu. She is a founder of CEO Think Policy Society. She has long experience in environmental policy sector, and she graduated from Harvard Kennedy School. Please, Mbak Afu, the time is yours. The next 20 minutes is yours.
Oke, selamat pagi Bapak dan Ibu yang terhormat, Mas dan Mbak sekalian. It is my pleasure to be among all of you this morning and sharing the panel with very respectable speakers and experts on this very topic. I would like to take a second to share my screen. I hope all of you can see it. So in the past hour or so, we have been listening to the experts directly on, I think, mainly how we can promote sustainable infrastructure in Indonesia. In the next maybe 15 minutes, I will take a step back and perhaps ask a more basic question in terms of why we need to do that in the first place. Now, some of you might already be convinced, and for all of you, that's great, and I think you can help me promote this message further. But in case any of you needs further convincing, I want to take you around the world on what has happened in the past month alone. I will first start with India, where last month hundreds of people living in the villages in the western coastal area of India have been hit by very heavy monsoon rains, destroying their infrastructure, their houses, their areas, and killing hundreds in the process. And in the same month, a record-breaking rainfall in China also flooded the subway areas, killing tens, if I'm not mistaken. The last number is almost 40 people in the subway alone, and hundreds in the other regions that are also affected by the record-breaking rain. In Germany and Western Europe, similarly, one of the hardest rains that has happened in over a century, killing hundreds of people, destroying houses, buildings, and lives, most especially. And now this might seem distant, and keep in mind that all of this is happening while the pandemic is still among us. So it has been really a lot for the international community, for everyone who's trying to survive amidst the pandemic and also getting hit by these climate disasters. And now this might seem like far away, but it's really much, much closer than we think as well. I know this photo is from January 2020, when Indonesia, and especially Jakarta and the surrounding Java regions, were hit by the heaviest rainfall in the past 150 years. But we all know that now almost every year, this heavy rain, almost every New Year, actually, we are celebrating, especially if you're in Jakarta, we're celebrating it with floods, and this of course leads to major losses in terms of damaged infrastructure and more. But not just I've been talking a lot about rains and floods, but it's not the only thing. In the case of Indonesia, severe and prolonged dry seasons also are affecting harvest cycles for our most vulnerable farmers, especially in Nusa Tenggara areas where last year there was almost, I think, more than 90 days of no rain at all. And in Sumatra and Kalimantan in 2019, and then before in 2015, major forests and land fires are affecting the surrounding communities, affecting crops, infrastructure in terms of the roads and the surrounding areas, and definitely leading to major losses. The projection, so looking back in the past 20 years, data indeed has confirmed that the frequency and intensity of climate disasters in Indonesia has been increasing. And this is part of the reason why sometimes we feel like climate disasters are far away in the future, but data has shown that it has been creeping already in front of us, if not like right at our front door, and kind of getting into our living room. So these are just some statistics showing that the frequency for climate hydrological and meteorological events that are related to climate change in the past 20 years have been increasing. And moving forward, all of this changes in weather, in seasons, and climate disasters will have major impacts that have been projected by many different organizations. But again, still looking back, the beyond climate disasters, all disasters, right, natural disasters, have led to, at least between 2007 and 2016, 6,000 lives lost and more than 20 million people displaced. Of course, a big event here is the tsunami and the multiple volcanic eruptions and earthquakes that have happened, and overall led to $16 billion of economic loss from direct damages in a series of these events that are listed on the right side. So those are from the major events, but on average as well, the losses that are coming from the cause of disasters, climate and otherwise, are huge. Yeah, so drought, earthquake, flood, again, mass movement, wet or flood, and also wildfire are leading to major costs for Indonesia. And so that was all looking back. And if we look forward, moving forward, this will get worse, right? Indonesia, like a lot of predictions, scientists have come up with a series of reports, one of which was published by the World Bank just this year, in terms of effects on sea level rise, flood, and also drought, how things will get even worse moving forward. So the number, for example, shows that over 4 million people, especially because in Indonesia, a lot of the cities are in the coastal areas, will be affected by sea level rise and permanent flooding, either from sea level or rain, as well as river overflow. Yeah. So this is all going to get even worse. And overall, one study from ADB shows that the potential loss from climate risks in Indonesia by 2100, I hope we're all have enough panjang umur, so that maybe we don't want panjang umur to see all of these disasters from happening, but can amount to 7% of Indonesia's GDP by then. And so we're not thinking about 7% GDP today, but like even more in the future. So those are all talking about the climate disasters in terms of why we need to adapt. But at the same time, building infrastructure today also leads to emissions, which worsens the climate disasters in the first place. So we see here how at the same time that we are being hit by all these disasters, we're also contributing to why the climate change is happening in the first place. So Indonesia is one of the largest emitters, which makes sense because Indonesia is a big country. Of course, next to China, the US, India, EU, and Russia. But what's interesting is on the right-hand side, where we see that energy, especially energy infrastructure, waste infrastructure, are also contributing significantly to Indonesia's emissions. So it's time to also think about how, in building infrastructure, we want to transition to a low carbon one. I think there are some changes in the fonts that makes this look a little bit disoriented, but basically what this slide is saying is that a majority of the financing gap that has been identified by the government of Indonesia to meet the emissions reduction target, a majority of that is for energy and transportation transition, which in other words is again the need to build the energy and transport infrastructure. So this is a huge gap, and I think Jeff, Pak Merijal, and others have been talking about some of the vehicles and the opportunities for to close the financing gap. But indeed, that's a major challenge at the moment. I do hope that like public-private partnership and all of that can be a way to close that gap. And so all of that is to say that then one of the goals that we need to support of the government of Indonesia is to achieve this NDC goal. And I think although so far we have been talking a lot about the mitigation target in terms of the 29 to 41% emissions reduction by 2030, there is a huge need to also talk about the adaptation gap. Again, like all this infrastructure that are vulnerable to climate disasters, how do we build better? How do we make them more resilient, plan better, put them in terms of spatial planning, plan them better so that it's the human settlement urban areas are more resilient to climate change. And so just to give some examples in terms of adaptation and the need to build resilient infrastructure, I believe that it starts with improve city planning, how we build our roads and bridges to be more flood resilient, climate disaster resilient, as well as buildings, as well as waste management infrastructure. For example, think about how climate change will also affect how we conduct that. But at the same time, as we are building these projects, we can also start thinking about how in the construction projects itself, we choose for the low carbon options, we choose more sustainable materials. For example, we make the projects more efficient. And as we build buildings, for example, we can consider how to come up with more energy efficient designs, as well as for transportation projects. And so among many things that we can do, as the laundry list I just shared, I would like to make the case that the focus should be, for now, given the limited resources and time, the focus should be on city vulnerability. So cities, meaning urban centers, really packed population, millions of people living in the city areas. Why? Because these are where most of our assets are, and this is where most people are, so they are at risk. We also want the investments. We also want to avoid inefficient investments, because as we're acknowledging all of these disasters, if we know that we can prevent and plan a better infrastructure building, so that we can avoid the cost that we've just been talking about. And at the same time, we also need to consider the capacity of the government, of the people implementing the projects in understanding and mainstreaming this idea of resilient infrastructure into their projects. So this is one preliminary desktop-based and very simple and exercise of looking at what specific areas in urban infrastructure can we consider based on, for example, desirability in terms of economic impact, feasibility, as well as climate impact. And this is not scientific quantitative scoring at all. It's more of like a general qualitative sense of where the interesting projects that can be focused on are, and they're basically like four things: is green building, waste management and recycling infrastructure, sustainable transportation, as well as drinking water and wastewater management are some of the key green infrastructure projects in the urban areas that we can score nicely in terms of desirability, climate impact, as well as feasibility. These are some of the breakdown of those, again, just very basic preliminary desktop study that requires further study to make it even more robust. But the general idea here is that the green building subsector represents a 23 billion investment opportunity by 2030. Based on an IFC report in 2018. And then 13 to 15% of commercial and residential construction by 2025 have been predicted to be green and should be leading to hundreds of thousands of jobs in the green construction. And this can contribute and is part of the 20% of national energy consumption, which will raise to 39% by 2030. So when we're talking about mitigation and preventing the climate disaster from getting even worse, considering about green buildings can be one of the focus, and it can also be effective in responding not only to the mitigation agenda but also the adaptation agenda through reducing vulnerabilities to these disasters. And then I want to talk about the existing regulation, how basically since 2011 there's already one national regulation and 3 local regulations that are regulating green buildings, including for Jakarta, Bandung, and Semarang. And as of June 2019, I know that it needs to be probably updated, but more than 5,000 new buildings have complied with the green building standards, and this is something to be to applaud. Yeah, I think moving forward, the question is how to do that even more consistently, and this can lead to potential saving of CO2 emissions from both cities. Is more than 1 million metric tons, and this is significant. So some options to further support green buildings as just one of the potential urban infrastructure resilient projects is through incentives, through more working with associations in delivering the capacity and the training, as well as for cities or regional areas that have no regulations, start promoting those regulations as well. And building resilient infrastructure will save lives and will support economic growth. We have seen before in terms of how it can save lives, it can protect the most vulnerable urban areas, avoid economic loss, protect the most poor and vulnerable, and can potentially also increase revenue or income from tourism if the infrastructure is more accessible. And so 2 final slides, just some food for thought. I think a lot of this has been discussed in more advanced level by the other speakers, but just highlighting again the importance of regulatory framework, efficient investments, improved capacity, and the role of communities in also understanding that the climate and other natural disasters will get worse for us, and how we can all come together and also raise awareness as community, and then engaging private sector, including through PPP scheme that we have discussed at length, and the potential financing mechanisms, as well as potential looking at options of safety nets that are more adaptive to the kind of disaster challenges that we are facing today. And so that's it. So it's quite straightforward and maybe obvious to some of you, but I hope that has provided some food for thoughts for further discussion. And I would highly recommend one book that talks about maybe not infrastructure in terms of building and roads per se, but like in terms of the technology infrastructure that is needed to get us to where we need to be in terms of avoiding climate disasters. This is a book by Bill Gates. There's an Indonesian translated version in Gramedia that you can read. But I think this is a helpful way to really think more innovatively about how we need to transition in building more sustainable infrastructure that are resilient to climate disasters in the future. And with that, I will stop my presentation. Thank you so much for listening in, and I look forward to discussing more in the Q&A session. Terima kasih. Kembali ke Mas Darmawan.
Terima kasih Mbak Afu. It was a great and very updated presentation regarding the position of Indonesia in terms of climate change, emission, and how green infrastructure can be part of projects or action to deal with that. It was a great. So now we come to the second session. This is panel discussion. Actually, I only have one question for 4 speakers. I think these 2 speakers definitely come from the government sides, and 2 speakers come from outside of the governments, analysts, and more few and non-state agency. Then regarding, I'm thinking about the reprioritization that Pak Hidayat Amir mentioned before. It is like, because recent research know that sustainable infrastructure and green infrastructure development is really needs more money, more funding, in terms higher than the conventional one. The issue is that it's still feasible for Indonesia right now because you know that the pandemic is really has everything, even not only Indonesia, but we talk about Indonesia today. And the pandemic is really now become a global challenge, not only issue of climate change itself, but also the pandemic. So it's like 50-50, you know, like it's quite difficult to deal these two very important things together. That's the question is that really feasible to do that now, or how to deal with that, to prioritize that situation? Pak Hidayat Amir and Pak May can be from government perspective, what have you done with the government and how the capacity of the government right now to deal with that, and maybe Pak Jeff and Pak Afu can see from outside of the government to see that the possibility and the opportunity that what Pak Jeff said before. Please, Pak Hidayat Amir first.
Thank you, Pak Darmawan. This is very interesting and challenging question. But Pak Darmawan, I already come to my belief. This is a very strong word we use this. That green infrastructure or greener development will bring double dividend. So as I mentioned earlier, usually we look at to the issues in the different perspective. But in the infrastructure development, definitely this is a long-term perspective. Because we already discussed a lot. I recall I go to IFT talking about economic transition, energy transition, and also I presenting my modeling on renewable energy on OECD back to 2017. The modeling on the energy transition, for example, I will give an example on the energy, more specific. If we're talking today, fossil fuel, of course, cheaper than more renewable energy or new source of energy, right? Because we have different level, we comparing different level. Fossil fuel energy or fossil energy already in the economic of scale, if you use the economic terminology. But the baby industry, new energy, this is in the initial stage of development. So it's still far to get the economic of scale. But we realize that fossil fuel give us or bring negative impact, externality, and so on. But new energy or renewable energy, more sustainable, more environmental friendly, and so on. So basically, Pak Darmawan, we have to make a transition.
Yeah.
Right? But the way to have this one, of course, the changing, we have to manage the changing, the transition very well. But in my perspective, again, the transition is must. We have to do this start from now, and we already started. Basically, we have what huge source of renewable energy. Basically, renewable energy will always be more available than non-renewable. So this is as I just assure you that this is need a political commitment, need transition management. But again, at the end, we believe that greener or green infrastructure need to be developed. This will bring double dividend for our life and also for the economy. In terms of economic growth, Pak Afu, Pak Jeff already highlight previously. I think I agree with you. Thank you, Pak Darmawan.
Thank you, Pak Amir. Pak Mei.
Yeah, we are on the same boat, Pak Amir. I think the questions is not that simple. Yeah, still feasible. Yeah, if you see on the very short term, yeah, you can say that it's not feasible, but in long-term perspective, we have to move to the better aspect of development, which is the sustainable energy. And government already decide to move to this better energy. Even we know that it needs more money, needs more comprehensive support, because the transitional from the fossil fuel to the energy-friendly, environment-friendly energy is not easy. Yeah, there are some aspects that have to be done, have to be prepared, but it is not. It doesn't mean that the COVID obstruct us to stop from the moving. Yeah, yes, there are some problems because of the COVID. Then a little bit set our energy to think about the COVID, but it doesn't mean that we stop from moving to the better energy, because we are thinking for the better future, for the better generations. It start to move to the sustainable energy concept. I think that my questions, my answer.
Oh wow, thank you, Pak Amir, Pak Hidayat Amir, dan Pak Mei. I'm so happy and excited to hear that. Two key policymakers in the Ministry of Finance has committed on that. This is a global challenge, and now Indonesia, I think, is moving forward to do much better in the future.
You know why I'm very optimistic to say that, because Pak Jeff Belmont smiles very wide. I'm sure that he is going to support us.
All right, so let's see. Comment from Pak Jeff and Mbak Afu. Mbak Afu, please, Mbak Afu, what do you think about two comments previously from the two key policymakers in the Ministry of Finance of Republic of Indonesia?
Yeah, Pak Darmawan, I'm very heartened listening to what Pak Hidayat and Pak Mei said, especially because they're policymakers. I think all changes, the most difficult ones start with the leadership, right? It takes political capital, it takes financial capital. But I think as long as there is commitment from the highest, top of government officials, then that's where the change starts to happen. But I want to make a comment particularly in terms of this. So again, going back to this Bill Gates book, because I've just finished reading it over the weekend, so it's still kind of fresh. One term that he said in the book is green premium, right? So this, the additional costs from changing from business as usual to, for example, renewable energy or fossil fuel-based car to electric cars, like he calls it a green premium. And the green premium, what we need to realize is that it's not the same for all of the transition, right? There are some transitions where the green premium is almost zero. So it's actually already competitive, but the reason why the transition is not happening is Bill Gates called this because the regulatory framework is 100 years old. So the green premium is already almost zero, but the regulation is not fast enough to adapt to this change. And then there are the green premiums that are really expensive, right? And that's where Bill Gates said, we need to really invest in R&D in those sectors. We need to invest in the research and development so that the green premium can be lowered down as much as possible. So that's his approach in this. And I really like, framing it this way, because it helps us think about, yes, we know it's costly to transition, but we always think about it as a big black box, as if everything is costly, but it's not the same. Like there are some things that make sense economically. Just as an example, maybe this is not infrastructure related, but in terms of packaging, for example, there is a clear reason why companies would want to efficiently package their stuff, right? Like if like whatever products, but because there's a perverse incentive where, more sophisticated packaging, or like if you package bigger than the actual ingredients, it seems more expensive. Like the consumers like the inefficient packaging, then there's the wrong incentive to actually package inefficiently. So this is an example where the green premium is zero. Like you actually should transition because there is no additional cost from being efficient, but there's wrong mindset or like wrong regulatory framework that makes the transition not happening. And so in the case of energy infrastructure, I think we need to carefully think about what are these green premiums and like what are the options, right? Because in the case of Indonesia, it's almost like a supermarket of renewable energy because other countries have limited options, but Indonesia has everything, geothermal, solar, wind, oceans like Bayu energy and all of that. And so for us, it's more about at the geographic level, how do we think about where the green premium is the least costly and how do we enable that transition for that specific geographic region to happen, right? I think the focus has been on Java and Bali, and maybe we keep thinking about, how to retire existing coal plants, but we can also think, outside Java and Bali, what kind of, clean energy can be built specifically tailored to the needs of the local people with their specific topography or geographical condition, for example. So yeah, this green premium concept, I think is really interesting and can help us frame the discussion further. Thanks, that would be my comment on this.
Thank you, Mbak Afu. Pak Jeff, please.
Ibu Afu, I want to know what the connection is with Bill Gates here. I hope you're getting a good premium for all this great marketing. So I think that's a super interesting question, and it does look scary, doesn't it? All the cost of moving into, and oh my gosh, we're having a hard enough time building infrastructure. It is, why in the world do we have to do all these newfangled blah, blah, blah? Actually, there's no choice. This is where we're going. This is where we're headed, period. There's loads of financing available for this, right? Getting debt for this, you throw a green project in front of the World Bank or ADB or AIB, we salivate, we get excited, we come running after it. Only ones, right? It used to be that the private sector didn't like working with us because our environmental standards were too high. Now they're desperate to work with us because our environmental standards are really high. And in fact, they want to push us farther. They're now competing with us for these projects, which in the old days, we were the only ones that would line up to do that. So there's a huge amount of money out there. To some extent, that's the only source of money. Companies are going to have a harder and harder time financing dirty technology. And I think PLN is very clever in they announced they're taking their coal assets and shoving it into a subsidiary. It's very clever, but set a line between the clean stuff and the dirty stuff, because pretty soon it's going to be really hard to finance that dirty stuff. And the more we invest in coal today, the more of a nightmare it's going to be 5-10 years from now when you go to refinance that construction cost and you can't do it because it's dirty. There are a lot of opportunities there financially. So under the Paris Agreement, there are already voluntary carbon credit markets that have been developing. Big companies want to show off how green they are, so they invest in projects that are green. And so there are a lot of really great opportunities for Indonesia to leverage in that money. As the Paris Agreement sort of matures and the NDCs are set, and now all of this is going to become a much larger market. So those credits are going to be really, really interesting. And I know Pak Luhut has been pushing on this, and the government's really keen on this, right? This is a big opportunity, and I know Sri Mulyani has been talking about it. And then finally, realize that we're moving on, right? And if now is the time, and the US, Europe, China have all started doing this, they're jumping into this 2 feet first, right? And because they're going to train their people up, they're going to create businesses, they're going to create opportunities, they will then be able to sell that capacity all around the world. Indonesia's got a great opportunity here. If we jump in with both feet, we develop this capacity here, we'll be able to sell it. It's a new market, it's a new business opportunity. So we can't look at it as costly and painful. We've got to look at it as the new it's a bit like complaining about the internet because it's so painful. No, actually, it's huge. It's an opportunity, and this is the next big opportunity for Indonesia. Thanks.
All right. It was really, really optimistic. Really optimistic. Saya jadi pengen segera pulang nih. Pak Amir. Pak Amir.
Lama.
Ngapain lama-lama di situ?
All right. Now we come to the latest session, which is question and answer. We have 3 questions. And another one is maybe direct question. The 3 question is from four speaker actually. Also, the first question is for Mbak Afu is from Alicia. Yeah, to Mbak Afu. What are the barriers that we are facing in implementing green infrastructure? Actually, everyone can deal with this question, but the question asked to Mbak Afu. Please, Mbak Afu.
Yeah, I really feel like this is a more appropriate question for the other experts as well. But maybe I will just briefly repeat what has been said in the presentation earlier. The primary one always is the regulatory frameworks, right? I think I've mentioned earlier that at the national level and in 3 cities, we already have regulations on green buildings. That's a good example. But I think more broadly, how would the regulation both at the national and subnational level can further provide the certainty, can signal the market, can signal the private sector as well that this is the direction that we want to go, and really enforcing it across the levels. The second one again is going back to this green premium notion, the idea that it's more costly to build infrastructure that are greener. But as we have listened from Pak Amir, Pak May, Jeff, this is where we're headed. This is, yeah, there's no way that you keep complaining about the additional cost, because data already shows as well that this is kind of a market failure in a way that, yes, you do need some more investment at the beginning, and maybe it's challenging to mobilize them, but it makes sense when you consider the externalities and the additional cost that will come if your infrastructure is not resilient and not green. So that's that. And I think finally it's again the political commitment, the leadership from the decision makers. And I think when it comes to this, I'm very encouraged by like a recent quote from Bu Sri Mulyani. I think she was interviewed by I wasn't sure, the Tick or like one of the online media, and the headline says, this is what Sri Mulyani thinks is more challenging than the pandemic. And if you click it, it's obviously a clickbait. And when you click it, it says that it's climate change, right? Like maybe you've also seen the illustration, the comic, where if COVID is a big wave like this, like the climate change will be even much hitting us much harder in the future. However, as Bu Sri Mulyani is a champion on this as well. But I think worldwide, both in Indonesia and worldwide, countries are still struggling to design their economic recovery programs to support, for example, green projects, right? I think some data shows that the top 50 economies in the world only spend 18% of their fiscal stimulus, COVID-related fiscal stimulus, in a green way. So a majority actually goes to either neutral or dirty type of projects. And this is also a huge challenge for Indonesia. So one CPI study shows that only 4% of the environmentally relevant fiscal stimulus are green. So I think I understand the trade-off, and I understand that we are transitioning, but there is an opportunity there to further increase this number to a more desirable level, so that as we are addressing or recovering, yeah, I'm not sure if recover, because we're still in the middle of it, but as we try to recover the economy, there are opportunities where we can do that at the same time as also enabling the transition. I think that would be my answer for this one, although I'm sure like everyone will also have their great inputs. And Jeff, I get some premium, like I'm trying to be best friends with Bill Gates. That's why I keep mentioning the book. He probably doesn't listen to this webinar, but who knows?
The book should be a door prize for today. Actually, I will ask the committee of the seminar. Okay.
Can I give
the second question.
Pak Darmawan, can I give my opinion on this? My response.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Pak Darmawan, Bu Afu, Pak Jeff, Pak May, and friends. Yeah, I said previously, this is already my belief. The challenge is how to change my belief become reality, our reality. This is the, I think we all agree on the ideas, on the objective. But this is not easy. This is very challenging. For example, as we already discussed earlier, infrastructure development need huge investment in initial, right? For example, when Pak Jeff mentioned previously about PFM developed based on coal, the power plant, right? Need a huge investment, and then the commitment also in the longer term, right? The contract in the longer term. So this is still exists, right? When we try to introduce new source of energy, so this is become not easier. It's not just okay. We will replace the old one with new one in one day. No, this is not that kind of thing. This is natural discuss. So I will go with the problem. Okay, regulation, but I will go further. Not only regulation, the commitment, the political commitment, and also the policy support. And we're trying to introduce, for example, because when we use fossil energy, basically there is a cost that not indigenized in the process. This is environmental cost. So we're trying to put that cost as addition of the fossil. We trying to introduce carbon tax, and now become in the discussion in the parliament in the new tax law proposal. So this is this kind of policy to make a balance, to make Asia smoothing transition from fossil fuel to renewable energy, and we giving incentive, stimulus for the renewable energy. This is the way we do. I don't know, but sometimes we need to be more quick on the response. We already discussed carbon tax long time ago, Pak Jeff. I think you following very well. But the implementation, of course, we always have a lagging. But how to shorten the gap, the time gap from the ideas, the discussion, and also the implementation. I think this is our challenge. I bring. I hope you all are supportive in these ideas. Thank you.
Wow, we will break the challenge, Pak Amir, which makes a really good breakthrough for that. Right. For the second question is from Dennis. Yeah, from Dennis. It's about the local government role in infrastructure development. So how to maximize the role of local government in supporting the infrastructure development? Because a lot of local government in Indonesia are still depending on the budget from the central government. Yeah, that's a over complication with the budget between local and central government. The question is actually asked to Pak Me and Pak Amir, please, Pak.
Amir yang lebih pas jawab tuh. Nanti saya nambahin Pak Amir dulu.
Pak Jeff, saya jawab pakai bahasa Indonesia ya Pak Jeff. Ini isu yang luar biasa. Jadi memang isu desentralisasinya itu juga luar biasa. Mencari titik temu keseimbangan. Pemerintah terbiasa berpikirnya well structured. Tetapi kan ini tidak. Ketika kita well structured, tetapi level tadi misalnya besaran, kemampuan, kapasitas local government itu beda-beda, itu makin complicated lagi. Jadi memang situasinya seperti itu, dan mungkin ada hal yang lain. Natural infrastructure itu, nature-nya infrastructure itu dia bisa saja across region. Kalau jalan across region, bangun pembangkit listrik bukan hanya punya kabupaten tertentu, mungkin lokasinya di situ, tetapi sebetulnya impact-nya nasional. Nah, bagaimana mencari titik temu itu? Tadi yang saya kasih contoh, ada pelabuhan dibangun gitu kan, jalannya geser karena ada perubahan bupati atau wali kota, geser, jangan di situlah, lewat sini gitu kan. Nggak match sistem. Jadi sipot yang dibangun bukan jadi sipot, dia jadi tempat mancing atau tempat pacaran gitu kan. Ini riset saya dulu itu di Sumatera, saya nggak usah sebut tempatnya. Tapi ada situasi yang seperti masalah koordinasi itu simpel diucapkan, nggak mudah desainnya. Tapi sekali lagi, kadang-kadang gagasan saja itu ketemu aja setelah kita ngobrolnya berlama-lama gitu kan, tidak langsung. Bagaimana sampai itu tetaplah jadi pertanyaan, biar terus ditanyakan dan kita mencari terus cara terbaik.
Ya.
Ini sekedar apa ya, menjawab untuk menyenangkan, tapi memang ini challenge.
Ya. Pak Wawan.
Pak Mei kayaknya punya
Oke, Pak Mei, silakan Pak Mei.
Ya, Pak Jeff, allow me to deliver in bahasa Indonesia ya. Bapak Ibu semuanya, ini memang butuh effort yang besar ya, butuh dukungan dari semua pihak. Para pihak yang terlibat itu tidak hanya pemerintah pusat, tapi juga pemerintah daerah. Ya. Nah, kesadaran akan pentingnya peran masing-masing ini memang membutuhkan effort yang tidak sedikit ya. Karena tadi itu perspektif berpikir, mohon maaf, sebagian teman-teman regional government itu mungkin 5 tahun sampai masa di pemerintahan dia, sehingganya mungkin keberlanjutan untuk itu yang kita tahu infrastruktur itu sendiri adalah long term development. Nah itu memang membutuhkan koordinasi seperti kata Pak Amir tadi. Tapi di samping itu faktor memaksa pemerintah daerah untuk mikir juga perlu kita lakukan. Ya, ini seperti contoh tadi skema pinjaman daerah ya, regional loan yang dikasih oleh pemerintah pusat itu. Ini hal yang terobosan saya kira ya. Kalau sebelumnya itu biasanya pemerintah pusat mengalokasikan saja dana dari pusat ke daerah berupa DA, DAU, DAK gitu ya. Dan mereka tidak berpikir untuk bagaimana untuk mengembalikan, karena itu seperti uang free money lah gitu. Dia tidak berpikir untuk mengembalikan, hanya berpikir untuk bagaimana ngabisin aja gitu. Ini saatnya kita menyuruh mereka untuk berpikir bahwa uang itu meter loh. Maka ada skema pinjaman daerah lewat SMI. Kalau pinjaman, mereka kita paksa mikir gimana dia bikin proyek yang ada revenue scheme-nya, sehingga dia bisa mengembalikan kewajiban pinjaman itu, meskipun ke pemerintah pusat ya. Tapi itu adalah cara kita memaksa mereka memikir atau meningkatkan awareness mereka, bahwasanya uang ini meter loh. Ini pemerintah pusat mendapat uangnya tidak hanya dari pajak, dari pinjaman hutang luar negeri juga gitu. Jadi kalau seandainya itu sudah spread out pemahaman mereka bahwa ini uang ini meter loh, jangan sembarangan dipakai, jangan habis-habisin aja, jangan hanya dituntut hanya untuk ngabisin gitu, tapi untuk mikir gimana untuk menggunakan yang efektif, dapat return, mampu mengembalikan dengan skema luan itu. Nah, jadi itu salah satu cara untuk memperluas kesadaran akan pentingnya peran semuanya di seluruh Indonesia. Karena pembangunan ini tidak mungkin dilaksanakan pemerintah pusat saja, sangat tidak mungkin. Regional government sangat penting perannya di sana, meskipun mungkin ada porsi-porsi infrastruktur yang dibiayai pemerintah pusat, tapi untuk nyambungin konektivitas di daerah-daerah itu peran pemerintah daerah di sana. Itu tambahannya Pak Wawan. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih banyak Pak Mei. Ya, that's so true ya. From the government perspective, Pak Jeff Delmon. So the third question is, yes, actually, what if too much infrastructure projects? What do you think? Is there any parameter of sufficient infrastructure development?
I'm not sure about too much infrastructure, but maybe the wrong infrastructure. It's really easy to invest in the wrong infrastructure. Things are tempting, they're politically exciting, somebody comes into your office with this great new idea and this great new technology, and let's try something new, and that's always really tricky. But that's government's big challenge. Pamir talked earlier about the economic impact, and that's got to be the #1 focus. Drive your agenda based on what you're going to deliver with your infrastructure, rather than who's going to be happy and how many votes you're going to get off the back of it. And that's really difficult in government, right? I mean, unfortunately, democracy is sort of focused in that direction, and it's really hard for government to focus its efforts, but it's super important. Thanks.
So ya, dan
nambahin dikit.
Ya, monggo Pak.
Ya, setuju dengan Pak Jeff. Kalau kita lihat data Infrastructure Development Index ya, di Asia Tenggara saja, Indonesia itu masih di bawah Pak Wawan, jauh di bawah. Kita sedikit di atas Vietnam, tapi di bawah Malaysia, bahkan Singapura paling bagus lah. Kita yang paling bawah tuh Infrastructure Index itu ukurannya ya mempertimbangkan sangat luasnya Indonesia, banyak ya kebutuhan infrastruktur Indonesia. Jadi kita kalau dari sisi too much infrastruktur, saya kira belum. Secara indeks dibandingkan dengan Asia Tenggara saja, kita jauh masih di bawah. Jadi masih not yet too much lah. Tapi saya setuju dengan Pak Jeff, ada a little bit wrong in this station. Atau mungkin disbursement-nya, penyebaran pembangunannya tidak merata ke seluruh Indonesia. Itu barangkali ada yang terpusat di wilayah Jakarta saja, barangkali itu ya. Tapi kalau too much, saya kira belum ya. Makasih.
Ya, mungkin karena juga infrastruktur biasanya inline dengan peradaban manusia, jadi biasanya selalu ada aja yang dibutuhkan manusia untuk mengakomodasi peradaban yang baru biasanya, dan many kind of infrastructure. Ada satu yang mungkin raise hand, pengen langsung bertanya dengan para pakar yang hari ini luar biasa, ini engagement-nya dapat banget, dan saya pikir diskusi sangat menyenangkan dan engage meskipun online. Ya, silakan Mbak Farah. Iya, Ibu Farah ya, Pak. Silakan.
Okay, my name is Farah, and currently I'm working in a vertical unit of Directorate General of States Asset Management in Lahat, Southern Sumatra. My question will be quick and short, but before we thank our speakers first, Pak Jeff, Pak May, Pak Amir, and Mbak Futami for making time in your busy schedule to speak at this event, and for DJKN Muda by putting their blood, sweat, and tears into making this event was a great opportunity for us. I have a question for Mbak Futami. When we choose infrastructure development, we have to spend more money to invest in it. Do you have a great example maybe for a country that implement green infrastructure development, and what kind of maybe key points that we can implement in our country? Thank you.
Should I go ahead? Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Mbak Farah, for this question. I think one key clarification I want to make first is I think when we talk about green infrastructure, there are also two things. Sorry, because I've been using green infrastructure in terms of gray infrastructure that are sustainable, right? But at the same time, there's also a global discourse talking about how we need to better integrate gray infrastructure, meaning like roads, bridges, buildings that are cement-based or baja beton, bahan-bahan bangunan, with green infrastructure, which is nature-based infrastructure as well. So when we talk about climate resilience, for example, not only we want the buildings and the roads and all of those to be resilient as green, but also we want to integrate that with open green spaces. We want to design the building that also leverage I don't know, like the rooftop, you plant trees and things like that. So how do we integrate gray infrastructure and green infrastructure in terms of nature based infrastructure? So with that clarification in mind, I think when it comes to thinking about which countries have done that well. One that comes to mind is Singapore. I know it's not, I know that like in Indonesia, we don't really like comparing ourselves to Singapore because things are way, much more complicated here and it's not comparable at all, but at least at the city level. So just thinking about Singapore as a city, right? I think they've managed to plan the city well, and they go so far, including especially in terms of for example, water management, and also even rain harvesting, water management system, and all of that. And not only that, the other impressive thing that they do also is just in terms of thinking about planning on housing and building. And city planning overall, how to think about the mobility of people, how you can literally go around Singapore without having a car at all, and all of that. I think they've done it quite well. And so before the pandemic, I've visited their, so they actually have a sustainability museum where they talk about all the sustainable ways that they've built the city with. So this is where I am getting all of this information from. But I think what I want to say here is that they weren't sustainable from the start. It's not like it's a plain area and they already know it needs to be built sustainably, but they did need to transition, is what I'm saying, and it was hard, and the transition maybe was expensive, and you need to invest in the transition. But I think what it shows is that not only in terms of resilience to climate and whatnot, but happier lives, right? Like this is something that is a bit hard to economically value, but how the people who live there feel comfortable, free of relatively free of pollution, waste is being recycled and managed, and it improves quality of life. And I think sometimes that's what we forget, and it's a bit hard to quantify, better quality of life. What is that, and how do we compare that with the cost that we have to invest in this green or sustainable infrastructure in terms of gray and green infrastructure? So I hope that somewhat answers your question, Mbak Farah, and thank you so much again.
Thank you, Mbak Abu. Any comment, Pak Hidayat Amir, Pak Mei, atau Pak Jeff? Example of city, or maybe example of policy in any countries that more advanced?
Well, I live in Singapore, so I'm very biased, but I completely agree with Ibu. You guys need to come over and visit. Fascinating what they're doing, and they're doing all kinds of, and it's all about business, right? Because Singapore, they don't do anything unless they're going to make money out of it. And it's not out of the goodness of their heart. They really see this as the next step, as the next generation of their business opportunities and how they're going to be big in the region. And so I think it's really exciting.
So it is proof then, Singapore as an example. Yeah.
Mas,
yeah.
Just short, Pak Darmawan.
Monggo.
I just to make some like a disclaimer. Well, yes, in the conventional economic, maybe we only quantitatively consider the monetary value, but we know in the contemporary economic, we're trying to consider not welfare itself, but the well-being, the quality of life. I think it's better definition of the development objective. Thank you.
It's already incorporated in the macro analysis that Pak Amir has been done right now. Well-being is one of important things that have been considered in green infrastructure right now. That was really nice discussion, and really, I think it's really valuable knowledge and valuable, a lot of knowledge, love, or experience that we got it from any speaker here. Then I come to the end of this discussion. I think we need to discuss more and give more detail in terms of the challenge, the issue, and how the implementation and any kind of tools to move to better green infrastructure development in Indonesia. But I think we have to end for this discussion today for this point, and I think I got some point also Pak Amir, Pak Mei, to connect to my thesis. So I will I'm not concluding, but just like a summary, the thing that maybe can give us an idea. Infrastructure is the backbone of economy. In line with that, to achieve a sustainable economic growth, we fully realize and prepare, mostly in political commitment to gear up and have considered on many factors. And financing and investing and considering a sustainable infrastructure as productive and green infrastructure, and also maximize its socio-economic impact. So, in short word, mungkin saya mau bilang bahwa ini opportunity, green infrastructure ini opportunity di masa recovery ekonomi hari ini, daripada mungkin gitu nggih, Pak Amir ya, Pak Mei, Pak Jeff atau Mbak Afu, daripada kita memang perlu transisi, tapi daripada kita membuang energi yang ke konvensional one, bagaimana kalau kita melihat satu alternatif building infrastructure yang lebih sustainable, lebih green, lebih punya dampak jangka panjang, sehingga ini akan bisa recovery ekonomi ini lebih sustain dalam jangka panjang, kira-kira begitu ya. Dan the fokus dari semua ide transisi dan development itu mungkin ada hal yang saya ingat betul yang dibilang sama Benjamin Disraeli, UK Prime Minister di 1868. There can be no economy where there is no efficiency. Nah, saya pikir ini menjadi clue yang pas ketika efisiensi menjadi satu center point of policy, satu center point of action, both government and private sector in any kind of sector, including participation from the community itself. I think that one. So, guys, Bapak Ibu sekalian, para speakers, saya ikut-ikutan guys karena kebiasaan nemenin anak saya nonton YouTube. Bapak Ibu speaker yang saya hormati, luar biasa. Saya senang sekali bisa dan merasa terhormat sekali bisa memandu acara ini. Bapak Ibu para peserta yang saya hormati juga senang sekali, dan mohon maaf kalau ada kesalahan. Semoga diskusi ini bisa berlanjut ke depan dan menjadi lebih advance lagi, lebih baik lagi, dan lebih konkret lagi, dan berkontribusi pada policy yang sedang dibangun oleh Indonesia, khususnya di Ministry of Finance, yang memang menjadi core atau nadinya dari pembangunan di Indonesia. Terima kasih. Akhirul kalam, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih Pak Darmawan yang sudah memandu seminar kita pada pagi sampai dengan siang hari ini. And if I may add some, Pak Darmawan, as a part of DJKN, also part of DJKN Muda, this I can highlight some notes, especially from Afu, before that Afu show us how vulnerable Indonesia is in terms of disaster or probably climate change. And Pak Jeff also mentioned there's no other way there's no way we go. This is the way we should go, and there's plenty of sources in the future to build a more sustainable infrastructure. And I also should thank you for our distinguished speaker. Terima kasih untuk Pak Hidayat Amir, untuk Pak Meri Jalnur, Kak Afu, also our mentor in DJKN Muda, untuk pengetahuan yang dibagikan kepada kita semua pada hari ini. And also I thank you, Pak Jeff Delmon, who share his valuable knowledge for us. Bapak dan Ibu yang kami hormati, sebelum kita akhiri, kami mohon perkenan Bapak dan Ibu sekalian, kita untuk berfoto bersama secara virtual. Kami mohon perkenan Bapak dan Ibu untuk dapat membuka videonya masing-masing, dan mungkin kita bisa berpose sejenak, mungkin dalam beberapa detik. Kami mohon bantuan teman-teman panitia untuk dapat men-screenshot untuk mengabadikan semua peserta yang ada di ruang Zoom ini. Boleh kita hitung, Bapak sudah siap? Kita hitung mungkin 1, 2, 3. Kami mohon untuk tahan dulu. Akan butuh beberapa detik bagi teman-teman untuk mencoba meng-capture semuanya. Thank you. Stay on a good posture and smile while the committee will take a screenshot on it. I think it's already done, teman-teman. Sudah ya? Oke. Terima kasih Bapak Ibu sekalian. So this the photo session conclude our seminar for today. We greatly expect that our seminar today can shed more light on sustainable infrastructure development to discuss its feasibility and possible challenges. and how it will eventually lead us to prosperous future. On behalf of the committee and all colleagues behind the screen, we do apologize if there's any mistake or something uncomfortable, make you uncomfortable during this webinar. Looking forward to see you in the future event. Stay safe, stay healthy. Happy anniversary Indonesia. Happy anniversary Direktorat Jenderal Kekayaan Negara. I'm David Sumaputra signing off. Wabillahi taufiq wa hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih Pak Amir.
Terima kasih semuanya Pak Amir.
Terima kasih Pak Amir.
Terima kasih Pak Amir, Pak.
Terima kasih Mbak Bumi.
Terima kasih Jeff Demon, thank
Terima kasih
you.
semuanya.
Ya, for participating. Terima kasih.